The midnight flight? The overhead lights dimmed throughout the cabin as Flight 847 cruised through the darkness between Chicago and Denver. Jasmine Torres pressed her forehead against the cool window, watching scattered lights from towns below disappear into vast stretches of nothing. She had chosen the window seat in the back of economy, tucking herself into the corner with a worn paperback and hoping for a quiet journey home after visiting her aunt. But quiet was not what the universe had planned. 3 rows ahead, a baby began to cry. The sound started small, a whimper that might have been soothed quickly. Then it grew. Within minutes, the cries became wails that echoed through the entire cabin with relentless intensity. Passengers shifted uncomfortably, some sighing loudly, others covering their ears with pillows or headphones. Jasmine felt her chest tighten, not with annoyance like the others, but with recognition. She knew that kind of crying. It was not hunger or discomfort. It was fear. It was the sound of a small soul who could not find peace, who sensed something was wrong in the world and had no words to name it. A father's desperation. Nathan Blake held his 9-month-old daughter Ruby against his chest, bouncing gently, murmuring words that disappeared into her screams. His eyes were bloodshot from exhaustion, his shirt wrinkled from the flight that had already lasted 3 hours too long. Nothing worked anymore. The bottle she refused. The pacifier she spit out. The rocking that used to calm her now seemed to agitate her more. He walked the narrow aisle for the 4th time, ignoring the stares and whispered complaints. A flight attendant offered a sympathetic smile, but no solutions. Nathan felt the familiar weight of failure pressing down on his shoulders. He was a successful man in every measurable way. He had built a technology company from nothing, employed hundreds of people, and made decisions that affected millions of dollars. But he could not help his own daughter's sleep. Ruby had been difficult since birth, but it had gotten worse after her mother died. The doctors said babies could not really understand death, but Nathan knew better. Ruby sensed the absence. She felt the hole where her mother's heartbeat used to be, and she cried because the world was not right anymore. The voice that changed everything. Jasmine closed her book, unable to concentrate with the baby's cries filling her ears. But more than that, she could not ignore the pull in her heart. She thought of her grandmother, the only person who ever made her feel safe during her chaotic childhood. When Jasmine would wake screaming from nightmares, terrified of the dark and the shouting from downstairs, her grandmother would gather her close and sing. The lullaby was simple. No grand melody, no clever lyrics. Just a gentle tune that seemed to wrap around fear and soften it into something bearable. Jasmine had not sung it in years, but now it rose in her throat as naturally as breathing. She began to hum. So softly at first she barely heard herself. The melody drifted through the cabin, carried on the recycled air and the collective hope of tired travelers. She did not sing for attention or applause. She sang because something inside her needed to reach that crying child and say, "You are not alone." The change was immediate and absolute. Ruby's cries stopped mid-breath. Her tiny body, rigid with distress, suddenly relaxed against her father's chest. Her fists unclenched. Her breathing slowed and deepened. The cabin fell into shocked silence, as if everyone was afraid to move and break whatever magic had just happened. Nathan froze. He looked down at his daughter in disbelief, then turned slowly, searching for the source of the sound. His eyes found Jasmine 4 rows back, her face flushed with surprise, her hand covering her mouth as if she could not believe what she had done. An unspoken connection, Nathan moved down the aisle carefully, Ruby already dozing in his arms. When he reached Jasmine's row, he had to clear his throat twice before words would come. "I don't know what you just did," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "but I need you to do it again." Jasmine blinked up at him, her brown eyes wide and uncertain. "I was just humming. My grandmother used to sing that to me when I couldn't sleep." "It worked," Nathan said simply. "Nothing has worked for weeks. Please, would you come sit with us? Just until she's fully asleep." Jasmine hesitated. She looked down at her faded jeans, her thrift store sweater, her scuffed sneakers. Business class was not a place for people like her. But the baby stirred slightly, a whimper starting, and Jasmine's heart made the decision before her mind could object. "Okay," she whispered. She followed Nathan to the front of the plane. Acutely aware of curious eyes tracking their movement, a flight attendant stepped aside with a knowing smile, and suddenly Jasmine was sinking into the wide leather seat beside Nathan's. The luxury felt foreign and uncomfortable. "May I?" Jasmine asked, her arms already instinctively reaching out. Nathan hesitated only a heartbeat before transferring his daughter into this stranger's arms. Ruby settled against Jasmine's chest as if she had been waiting for exactly this. Jasmine adjusted the baby's position, cradling her head, and began to hum again. The lullaby's gift, the melody filled the space between them, soft and unhurried. Jasmine did not perform. She simply gave what had once been given to her: comfort without conditions, safety without questions, love without demands. Ruby's breathing deepened. Her tiny fingers curled into Jasmine's sweater. Holding on as if she had finally found an anchor in the storm, Nathan watched, unable to look away. This woman, this complete stranger, had done in moments what teams of pediatricians and sleep specialists could not accomplish. But it was more than just the technique or the song. It was the way Jasmine held Ruby with a tenderness that seemed to come from deep wells of understanding. "She reminds me of myself," Jasmine said quietly, more to Ruby than to Nathan. "I used to cry like that. My grandmother was the only one who knew how to make it stop." "She must have been special," Nathan said. "She was everything." Jasmine's voice caught. "She died when I was 12. I still miss her every single day." Nathan saw the grief flicker across Jasmine's face, brief but unmistakable. He recognized it instantly because he wore the same shadow. Loss left a mark that never fully faded. You learned to carry it, but it never got lighter. "Ruby's mother died," Nathan heard himself say. The words came before he could stop them. "During childbirth, she never got to hold her daughter, never got to sing to her." Jasmine looked up at him then, really looked, and something passed between them. An understanding that needed no explanation. They were both survivors of grief, both people who knew what it meant to lose the ones who made the world feel safe. "I'm sorry," Jasmine whispered. "Thank you," Nathan said. And he meant it for more than just her condolences. The warmth of kindness, says Ruby, fell deeper into sleep. Nathan noticed Jasmine shivering slightly. The cabin's air conditioning was aggressive in business class. Without a word, he pulled his jacket from the overhead compartment and draped it over her shoulders. Jasmine startled at the gesture, her eyes wide. "You don't have to do that. You're keeping my daughter warm," Nathan said simply. "Let me do the same for you." Jasmine pulled the jacket tighter, breathing in the faint scent of cedar and something clean. It was expensive fabric, the kind she would never own. But right now, with Ruby breathing softly against her chest and this man's kindness settling around her shoulders, she felt rich in ways that had nothing to do with money. They sat in comfortable silence as the plane continued its journey through the darkness. The cabin had settled into a peaceful hush, grateful for the crying that had finally stopped. Other passengers dozed or read or stared at screens. But Jasmine and Nathan existed in their own small world, connected by the sleeping baby between them. "Your voice?" Nathan said after a long while. "It sounds like something I used to know." Jasmine glanced at him, but his gaze was distant, lost in memory. "My wife used to sing, not the same song, but the same way you do." Like the words mattered less than the feeling behind them. A tear slipped down Nathan's cheek before he could stop it. He turned his head quickly, embarrassed, but Jasmine had already seen. She did not say anything. Some grief ran too deep for words. Some pain could only be honored with silence and presence. The landing. When the plane touched down in Denver, the cabin lights brightened, breaking the gentle spell that had held them. Jasmine carefully passed Ruby back to Nathan, their fingers brushing in the exchange. The baby remained asleep, peaceful in a way Nathan had almost forgotten was possible. "Thank you," Nathan said again, his voice carrying more weight than two simple words should hold. Jasmine nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She shrugged off his jacket and handed it back, already feeling the loss of its warmth. People began gathering their belongings, shuffling toward the exits in tired lines. Jasmine stood quickly, slinging her bag over her shoulder. She wanted to say something meaningful, something that would capture the strange beauty of what had just happened. But words felt inadequate, and besides, moments like these were not meant to be kept. They were meant to be experienced and then released, like fireflies glowing briefly before disappearing into the dark. "Take care of her," Jasmine said softly. One last glance at Ruby's peaceful face. Then she turned and walked down the aisle, weaving through passengers, moving quickly toward the exit. She did not look back. She never looked back. That was the rule she had learned early in life. Do not get attached. Do not hope for more. Be grateful for the moment, and then let it go. Nathan stood at the edge of business class, Ruby against his shoulder, watching Jasmine disappear into the crowd. He wanted to call out, to ask her name, to get her number, to somehow keep this connection from dissolving. But his throat closed around the words, and the moment passed by the time he reached the terminal. She was gone. Walking away, Jasmine stepped out into the cool Denver morning, pulling her thin jacket tight against the mountain chill. Her heart felt oddly full and strangely hollow at the same time, like a cup that had been filled and emptied in the same breath. She walked toward the bus stop, trying not to think about Ruby's tiny fingers curled into her sweater, or the way Nathan's eyes had held equal parts gratitude and sorrow. People like her did not get to keep moments like that. She was a background character in other people's stories, a brief comfort before they moved on to their real lives. Nathan was clearly wealthy, clearly important, clearly from a world that had no space for bookstore clerks who lived paycheck to paycheck. The bus arrived, and Jasmine climbed aboard, finding a seat near the back. As Denver's skyline came into view through the dirty window, she let herself remember the lullaby one last time. Then she tucked the memory away, deep where it could not hurt her, and focused on getting home to her small apartment and her ordinary life. She never knew that across the city, a man sat in the back of a car with his sleeping daughter, unable to stop thinking about the woman who had sung them both back from the edge of something dark. She never knew that he would spend the next few days searching for her, hoping the universe would be kind enough to let their paths cross one more time. The search begins. Nathan. Blake sat in his downtown Denver office, staring at spreadsheets that blurred together into meaningless numbers. 5 days had passed since the flight, and he could not stop thinking about the woman who had sung Ruby to sleep. He had tried everything to find her. He reviewed the passenger manifest, but there were 47 women in economy class that night. Privacy laws prevented him from getting contact information. Ruby had returned to her restless nights. She would fall asleep only to wake screaming an hour later, inconsolable, until exhaustion finally claimed her again. Nathan hired 3 different nannies that week. Each one came highly recommended, trained in the latest child development techniques. Ruby rejected them all, crying harder whenever they tried to comfort her. "She's looking for something," the last nanny had said before quitting. Or someone. "I don't know how to help her." Nathan knew exactly who Ruby was looking for. The same person he was searching for. On Friday afternoon, Nathan left work early. He drove through Denver's neighborhoods with Ruby strapped in her car seat, both of them restless and hoping. He did not have a plan, just a feeling that he needed to look. The woman had mentioned loving books, had held a worn paperback on the plane. Maybe she worked at a bookstore. Maybe she volunteered at a library. It was a desperate hope, but it was all he had. Pages and Dreams, the bookstore, sat on a quiet corner in the arts district, its windows painted with autumn leaves and handwritten quotes about the magic of reading. Nathan almost drove past it, but something made him slow down. Through the window, he saw children sitting cross-legged on a colorful rug, their faces turned upward toward someone reading to them. He parked and approached slowly, Ruby in his arms. As he got closer, he heard a voice drifting through the slightly open door. Warm, gentle, achingly familiar. His heart stopped. There she was. Jasmine sat on a low wooden stool, a picture book open in her lap. Her dark hair was pulled back in a loose braid, and she wore a soft green cardigan over jeans. She read with complete focus, changing her voice for different characters, laughing at the funny parts. The children were mesmerized. Nathan stood outside for far too long, just watching. Ruby stirred in his arms, making a small sound of recognition. Somehow, even at 9 months old, She knew. A door opened, the small bell above the door chimed, when Nathan finally stepped inside. Several children turned to look, but Jasmine's eyes found him immediately. She stopped mid-sentence, her mouth forming a small uno of surprise. For a long moment, they just stared at each other across the bookstore. Then Jasmine smiled. Not a polite smile, not a customer service smile, but something genuine and unguarded that made the entire room feel warmer. "I need to know how this story ends," a little boy complained, tugging on Jasmine's sleeve. "Of course," Jasmine said, pulling her attention back to the children, but her eyes kept drifting to Nathan as she finished the book. When the story ended and the children scattered to browse the shelves, she stood slowly and walked toward him. "Hi," she said, her voice soft. "Hi," Nathan replied, feeling absurdly nervous. "I hope this isn't too strange. I was just driving around and saw the bookstore and thought maybe you might work somewhere with books, and I know that sounds like I was looking for you." Which I was, but not in a creepy way, just in a hoping our paths would cross way. Jasmine laughed, and the sound dissolved his nervousness. "I'm glad you found me. I've been wondering how Ruby was doing." As if on cue, Ruby squealed with delight, reaching her arms toward Jasmine with such enthusiasm that Nathan nearly dropped her. Jasmine's eyes filled with tears as she gathered the baby into her arms. "Hello, sweet girl," Jasmine whispered against Ruby's soft hair. "I missed you too." Ruby settled instantly against Jasmine's chest, making contented sounds and gripping her cardigan with tiny fists. Nathan watched the transformation with wonder. This was the peaceful child he remembered from the plane. The one who had disappeared the moment they landed. Coffee and conversation, they walked to a small cafe 2 blocks away, the kind with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls. Jasmine ordered chamomile tea. Nathan ordered black coffee. He was too distracted to drink. Ruby sat contentedly in Jasmine's lap, playing with the spoon and babbling happily. "She hasn't slept more than 2 hours at a time since the flight," Nathan admitted. "I thought maybe it was a fluke what happened on the plane. But seeing her now, I think she was waiting for you." Jasmine looked down at Ruby, her expression tender and sad. "Babies are smarter than we give them credit for. They know who makes them feel safe." "My grandmother used to say that too," Nathan said. "She helped raise me after my dad left. She said children are like flowers. They turn toward whatever gives them light." "That's beautiful," Jasmine said. They talked for 2 hours. About childhood and loss, about the grandmothers who had shaped them, about books and music and the strangeness of grief. Jasmine was quieter than Nathan, choosing her words carefully. But when she spoke, everything she said felt true. Nathan found himself telling her things he had not shared with anyone. About how his wife Lillian had been his college sweetheart, how they had built his company together, how her death had shattered him so completely he still did not know how all the pieces fit back together. "I keep thinking I should be over it by now," Nathan said. "It's been almost a year. People expect me to be moving on." "Grief doesn't have a timeline," Jasmine said quietly. "Anyone who tells you it does has never really lost someone." Nathan looked at her closely. "You sound like you know. Her grandmother raised me after my parents proved they couldn't. She was everything good in my childhood. When she died, I thought I would die too. I was 12 and suddenly alone in a world that didn't care if I existed." Jasmine paused. "I learned to keep moving, to not expect too much, to be grateful for small kindnesses and not hope for more." "That sounds lonely," Nathan said. "It was," Jasmine admitted. "It still is sometimes." Days of discovery, they began meeting every day after that. Nathan would pick up Jasmine after her shift at the bookstore, and they would explore Denver together. They took Ruby to the park, where Jasmine pushed her on the baby swings, and Nathan captured photos on his phone. They visited the aquarium, where Ruby pressed her hands against the glass and laughed at the colorful fish. In the evenings, they went to quiet diners where Ruby could sit in a high chair between them, happily smashing crackers while the adults talked. Jasmine told Nathan about her love of stories, how books had been her escape during a childhood filled with instability. Nathan told her about building his company from nothing, about the pressure of success, about how lonely it felt at the top. "Money doesn't fix the important things," Nathan said one evening. "I can hire the best nannies, the top pediatric specialists, afford everything Ruby could ever need. But none of it helps her sleep, 'cause what she needs isn't something you can buy, Jasmine said gently. She needs to feel loved and safe. That only comes from people who really see her. Nathan looked at Jasmine across the table, Ruby dozing peacefully in her arms. You see her. You saw her from the first moment. Jasmine's cheeks flushed. She's easy to love. The growing bond 2 weeks passed in a blur of simple joys. Jasmine started keeping extra clothes at Nathan's house for the times they got caught in rain at the park. Nathan bought a high chair that lived in his kitchen but rarely got used because Ruby preferred sitting in Jasmine's lap during meals. They developed routines without discussing them, small rituals that felt like they had always existed. Every evening, Jasmine would sing Ruby to sleep. Sometimes Nathan would sit in the doorway of the nursery watching and listening. The lullaby never changed, but somehow it sounded different each time. Some nights it was peaceful. Other nights it carried a weight of sadness that made Nathan's chest ache. One evening, as Jasmine finished the song and carefully laid Ruby in her crib, she found Nathan waiting in the hallway with tears on his face. I'm sorry, he said quickly. It's just that your voice sounds so much like Lillian's did. Not the tone, but the feeling behind it. The love. Jasmine stepped closer, her hand hovering near his arm before gently touching it. She loved Ruby very much, didn't she? She died loving her, Nathan said. The last thing she said was asking if the baby was okay. She never got to hear that Ruby was perfect and healthy. She just slipped away hoping. Jasmine's eyes filled with tears. Then every time I sing to Ruby, I'll make sure she knows. I'll tell her about the mother who loved her so much she gave everything. Nathan pulled Jasmine into a hug before he could think better of it. She stiffened for just a moment, then melted into his embrace. They stood in the dim hallway, holding each other while Ruby slept peacefully nearby. And for the first time since Lillian's death, Nathan felt like maybe he was not carrying his grief alone. The perfect afternoon Saturday brought unseasonably warm weather, and Nathan suggested a picnic at Washington Park. They spread a blanket under a massive oak tree, surrounded by families and dog walkers and couples holding hands. Ruby crawled around the blanket, discovering grass and leaves with delighted squeals. Jasmine lay on her back, staring up through the branches at the blue sky beyond. Nathan sat beside her, watching Ruby explore while keeping her within arm's reach. This is nice, Jasmine said softly. I don't remember the last time I just lay in the grass and did nothing. When was the last time you let yourself rest? Nathan asked. Jasmine thought about it. I don't know. I'm always working or worried about money or trying to figure out what comes next. Resting feels like a luxury I can't afford. Everyone needs rest, Nathan said. Even people who think they don't deserve it. Jasmine turned her head to look at him. Is that what you think? That I don't feel like I deserve rest? Nathan met her gaze. I think you spent your whole life believing you have to earn every good thing that happens to you. I think you don't know how to accept kindness without wondering what it costs. Jasmine sat up slowly, pulling her knees to her chest. You're right. I've never had anything that didn't come with conditions. Good things don't just happen to people like me. What do you mean, people like you? People with no family, no degree, no real plan for the future. People who work in bookstores and live in studio apartments and can barely afford rent. Jasmine's voice was matter-of-fact, not bitter, just stating what she believed was truth. Nathan's jaw tightened. None of those things determine your worth. Maybe not, Jasmine said. But they determine what kind of life I get to live. It's the moment that changed everything. They packed up the picnic as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Ruby had worn herself out crawling and playing, her eyes already drooping as Nathan strapped her into the stroller. They walked slowly back to Nathan's car, comfortable in the silence that had grown between them. When they reached the parking lot, Nathan loaded the stroller while Jasmine held Ruby, swaying gently to keep her calm. Ba ba ba, Ruby babbled, her tiny hand patting Jasmine's cheek. That's right, sweet girl, Jasmine murmured. Time for bed soon. Ruby looked directly at Jasmine, her dark eyes serious and focused. Then, clear as a bell, she said it. Mama, time stopped. Jasmine froze, her eyes going wide. Nathan dropped the diaper bag he was holding. Ruby, oblivious to the earthquake she had just caused, repeated it louder. "Mama? Mama." Jasmine's face crumpled. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she held Ruby tighter, pressing her forehead against the baby's. "Oh, sweetheart, no. I'm not your mama. I'm just someone who cares about you very much." But Ruby was insistent, reaching up to touch Jasmine's tears with curious fingers. "Mama," she said again, this time softer, like she was trying to comfort Jasmine instead of the other way around. Nathan stood completely still, his heart hammering in his chest. He watched Jasmine cry while holding his daughter, watched Ruby respond to her with a trust and love that could not be faked or forced. Something shifted inside him, something fundamental that he had been trying not to acknowledge. This was not just gratitude anymore. This was not just appreciation for someone who helped his daughter sleep. This was something bigger, something that terrified him because it felt too much like hope. "I'm sorry," Jasmine whispered, her voice breaking. "I didn't teach her that. I never tried to replace anyone." "I know," Nathan said, finding his voice at last. He stepped closer, his hand coming to rest on Jasmine's shoulder. "You didn't do anything wrong. Ruby knows what she feels. Babies don't lie about love." Jasmine looked up at him, tears still streaming down her face. In her arms, Ruby yawned and snuggled closer, completely content. The three of them stood in the parking lot as the sky darkened around them, bound together by something none of them fully understood. "What do we do now?" Jasmine asked quietly. Nathan had no answer, because the truth was complicated and messy and full of questions he was not ready to face. How could he let himself develop feelings for someone when his wife had only been gone a year? How could he ask Jasmine to step into a role that came with so much weight? How could any of this possibly work? But as he looked at Jasmine holding Ruby, at the way they fit together like missing pieces finally found, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He did not want to let this go. The weight of reality the days following Ruby's first words should have been filled with joy. But instead, a strange tension settled over their small circle. Jasmine became quieter, more hesitant. She still came over every evening to help with Ruby, still sang the lullaby that had become their ritual. But something in her had shifted. Nathan noticed her staring at his house with different eyes, taking in the expensive furniture, the original artwork on the walls, the kind of casual wealth that he had stopped noticing years ago. He watched her fingers trace the marble countertops in his kitchen, as if measuring the distance between his world and hers. "Tell me what you're thinking," Nathan said one evening after Ruby was asleep. Jasmine was washing dishes that could have gone in the dishwasher, her hands moving methodically through soapy water. "I'm thinking that this is a really nice kitchen." "That's not what I meant." She rinsed a plate carefully before setting it in the drying rack. "I know." Nathan came to stand beside her, taking the dish towel and drying what she had washed. They worked in silence for several minutes, the only sound the running water and the clink of dishes. "Ruby calling you Mama scared you," Nathan said finally. Jasmine's hands stilled in the water. "Yes." "Why?" "Because I'm not her mother, Nathan. I'm just someone who happened to be on a plane and sang a song. I'm not equipped to be what she needs long term. I think you're more equipped than you realize." Jasmine pulled her hands from the water and dried them roughly on her jeans. "I don't have a degree in child development. I don't have training or credentials. I work in a bookstore for barely above minimum wage. I live in a 400 square foot apartment with a bathroom so small I can touch both walls at the same time." "None of that matters to Ruby," Nathan said. "Maybe not to her," Jasmine said, her voice rising slightly. "But it matters to everyone else. It matters to your world." The business lunch Nathan had tried to keep his personal life separate from his professional one. But on Wednesday, circumstances forced them together. His business partner insisted on a lunch meeting at a restaurant downtown, and Nathan's usual nanny canceled at the last minute. He called Jasmine, apologetic and stressed. "I know it's your day off, but would you mind watching Ruby during lunch? It's just 2 hours. You can come to the restaurant if you want. There's a beautiful outdoor patio." Jasmine hesitated, but Ruby's delighted squeals in the background made her decision. "Okay, I'll be there." The restaurant was the kind of place Jasmine had only seen in magazines. White tablecloths, fresh flowers on every table, waiters in pressed black uniforms gliding between patrons who looked like they belonged there. Jasmine felt every eye on her as she pushed Ruby's stroller across the patio in her Target jeans and cotton blouse. Nathan stood when he saw her, his face flooding with relief. "You're a lifesaver." "Thank you so much." The man sitting across from him also stood, extending his hand. Benjamin Porter, partner at Blake Technologies. "Jasmine Torres," she said, shaking his hand and feeling the quality of his suit against her palm. "Why don't you join us?" Nathan suggested. "We're just finishing up business talk anyway." Jasmine wanted to refuse, but Ruby was already reaching for her. So she sat in the empty chair and lifted the baby into her lap. Benjamin's eyes tracked the movement, curiosity evident on his face. "So, Jasmine," Benjamin said with casual interest, "how do you know Nathan?" "We met on a flight a few weeks ago," Jasmine said. "And you're the nanny now?" Benjamin asked. "No, I'm just helping out today. She works at Pages and Dreams," Nathan added. "The bookstore in the Arts District?" "Oh, how nice," Benjamin said in a tone that made nice sound small and quaint. "That must be rewarding work. Not lucrative, I imagine, but rewarding." "It's honest work. I like helping people find stories that matter to them." Of course," Benjamin said, signaling for another glass of wine. "Nathan here could probably buy the whole bookstore as a birthday present." Nathan's jaw tightened. "Benjamin, what?" "I'm just saying, you've been working too hard lately. Maybe you need more leisure time. Have you thought about that vacation house in Aspen I mentioned?" As Benjamin droned on about real estate investments and stock portfolios, Jasmine felt herself shrinking in her chair. Ruby played with her fingers, oblivious to the growing tension, but Jasmine felt every word like a paper cut. Small individually, but collectively, they bled. The crack widens that evening. Jasmine declined Nathan's invitation to stay for dinner. She handed Ruby over at the door, her smile polite but distant. "Are you okay?" Nathan asked. "Just tired," Jasmine said. "I'll see you tomorrow." But tomorrow came, and she texted that she had picked up an extra shift at the bookstore. The day after, she said she was not feeling well. By the weekend, Nathan knew something was seriously wrong. He showed up at her apartment unannounced on Sunday morning. Ruby bundled in a warm jacket. Jasmine answered the door in pajama pants and an oversized sweatshirt, her hair in a messy bun, surprise evident on her face. Nathan asked. Jasmine stepped aside to let them in. Her studio apartment was exactly as she had described, tiny but immaculately clean. Books lined makeshift shelves made from cinder blocks and wood planks. A futon served as both couch and bed. The whole space could have fit in Nathan's living room twice over. "I'm sorry about Benjamin," Nathan said, as soon as the door closed. "He's brilliant with technology, but terrible with people. I should have shut him down." "He wasn't wrong, though," Jasmine said, sitting on the futon and pulling her knees to her chest. "You could buy my bookstore. You probably spend more on coffee in a month than I make in a year. Money isn't everything. People who have money always say that." Jasmine's voice was not angry, just tired. "But the rest of us live in a world where money determines everything. Where we live, what we eat, whether we can afford to go to the doctor when we're sick." Nathan set Ruby on the floor with some plastic cups to play with, then sat beside Jasmine. "I'm not trying to minimize your experience. I know I have privilege, but I also know that my money didn't help me when Lillian died. It didn't make Ruby stop crying. It didn't ease my grief or loneliness. But it gave you options," Jasmine said. "You could hire help. Take time off work. See therapists. I had to keep showing up to my minimum wage job 3 days after my grandmother died because I couldn't afford to miss rent." Nathan was quiet for a long moment. "You're right. I'm sorry." Jasmine wiped at her eyes, frustrated by the tears that kept coming. "I'm not trying to make you feel guilty. I'm trying to make you understand why this can't work."
Ow.
"This." Jasmine gestured between them. "Whatever this is. You and me and Ruby playing house. It's not real life, Nathan. Real life is you in your world and me in mine, and those worlds don't mix." The breaking point, Nathan opened his mouth to argue. But Ruby chose that moment to crawl over to Jasmine. Pulling herself up using Jasmine's legs. "Mama," she said clearly, reaching up with grabby hands. Jasmine's face crumpled. She picked Ruby up and held her close, breathing in the baby shampoo smell of her hair. "I can't be your mama, sweet girl. I wish I could, but I can't." "Why not?" Nathan asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Because one day you'll realize I'm not enough. One day Ruby will need things I can't provide, opportunities I can't give her, connections I don't have. And when that day comes, you'll find someone more suitable, someone from your world who fits better." "That's not true, isn't it?" Jasmine met his eyes. "You'll meet someone at a business function or through friends. Someone educated and successful and comfortable in restaurants where the appetizers cost $50. Someone who knows how to navigate your world because they come from it. And I'll go back to being what I've always been, alone and invisible." Nathan felt panic rising in his chest. "Is that really what you think? That you're just a placeholder until someone better comes along?" "I think I'm realistic about who I am and where I belong." "You belong with us," Nathan said firmly. "Ruby loves you." He stopped himself, the words catching in his throat. Jasmine waited, her heart pounding. "You what?" Nathan looked at her, his eyes full of something that looked like fear and hope tangled together. "I care about you, Jasmine. More than I thought I could care about anyone again. You're not a placeholder. You're not invisible. You're important. You're important enough to fit into your life permanently. Important enough to introduce to your business associates and wealthy friends. Important enough to be Ruby's mother in every way that matters." Jasmine shook her head. "I don't think so, Nathan. And I can't keep pretending this will end anyway, but with me getting hurt."